The concept of culture is really abstract. In order to understand it, it is important to study its features. The first feature is that culture is learnt. Men are socialized in a cultural environment. Culture is handed over from one generation to another, and thus the tradition is preserved. Once born into a society, the individual learns its cultural norms. It is the learnt way of behavior, that is, culture is the learnt way of behavior. Man learns the cultural behaviors initially within the family and then through the external social world. For example, a child learning to eat with hands or with spoons or with the chopstick have their own roots in the culture. The second feature is culture is social. Culture is a product of society. It originates and is developed within a social context. It does not exist in isolation. Culture is the unique feature of human society. Man becomes a social being only by learning cultural norms and values. Culture helps man to develop human qualities in a human environment. The overall function of culture is to make society stable and consistent. For example, human etiquette in wedding parties is inculcated by the cultural norms. In wedding parties, we are expected to behave in a particular fashion at different rituals of the wedding. At one point, we are very informal, we celebrate it by dancing and singing, but under certain other rituals, we have to be very serene, chanting mantras and be calm. So, all these behaviors are taught to us by our cultural values. The mode of worshipping God in a temple is also a cultural behavior that could be quoted as an example. Thirdly, culture is transmitted from generation to generation. The societies are stable because the culture of each society is being transmitted from one generation to the next. The family and other social institution pass the culturally prescribed traits to the growing children. Transmission of culture takes place by instructions from elders and also by imitation of the child. In this respect, language plays an important role. For example, the father instructing a son to obey traffic rules, and another example, the child keenly watching his sisters and learning to dress up. Fourth characteristic feature is that culture is shared. The main function of culture is to make all the members in a society to share certain behaviors and norms, so that the social life is acceptable to each other. In this way, the cultural qualities and beliefs are shared by the members of that particular society. The values, traditions, ideas, morals and practices are shared by the people of a society. Robert Bierstedt says that culture is something adopted, used, believed, practiced or possessed by more than one person. It depends upon group life for its existence. Fifthly, culture is integrated. Culture consists of many elements within itself. All these elements are interrelated. There is no contradiction between the elements. The value system is very closely related to the moral aspects and customs, which in turn is rooted in the tradition and religion. The status of Indian women could be quoted as an example. The Hindu religion places women or the wife in the secondary position to men in all rituals. In all rituals, men's role is dominant. This feature of men being dominant and women playing the secondary role is reflected in the women abuse, restrictions on women and widowhood. Women are refrained from education and economic freedom. All these different aspects of culture are interrelated. The sixth feature is culture is cumulative and dynamic. Culture is the integral part of any society at all times. It exists in all periods. It is being handed over from generation to generation, as I said earlier, but this does not mean that culture is static and stable without any alterations. When culture is transmitted through generations, it grows with new elements being added to it according to the new situations. Many elements of culture get modified gradually when there is a need. New items are also included to the existing culture. In this way, culture is cumulative. For example, traditional cultural practices like kolam that finds a new dimension in rangoli in the modern days. Then new dressing pattern that we find in these social situations. Then using modern technology to cook traditional food, and also new form of Indian fast food that have become part of Indian culture now. So, culture is also responsive to the changing conditions and hence it is dynamic and adaptive. Seventh point, culture is gratifying. Culture provides guidelines to its people, how one has to perform a role, what should be the appropriate cultural goal, and what morality to adopt are prescribed by culture. Culture also decides how people should be placed at different social positions, whom one should marry, and how to perform religious duties. Without these rules being taught to the individuals, there will be chaos in the social life. When culture prescribes all these patterns and puts certain taboo on certain types of behavior, everything goes on smoothly. All aspects of human life are regulated because of culture. For instance, in South India, cross cousin marriages are the preferred way of partner selection, while in the North India, total exogamy is adopted. This is the cultural guideline adopted by people. Eighth one, culture varies from society to society. Every society differs in its cultural tradition. Depending on the historical background and geographic locations, cultures develop. Based on these two factors, the philosophy, practices, dressing pattern, food habits and values differ between social groups. In the coastal areas, fishing and fish eating is a common cultural practice. The tribal culture is different from the coastal culture. In tribal areas, their dressing pattern, their practices of worshipping gods, their leadership, everything differs from the coastal culture. European culture is different from Chinese tradition, but in the modern days with increasing trend in globalization, improving transportation and communication system, a global culture is evolving. The information technology has created a tremendous change in the social lives of the people. There is importing of knowledge, information from one society to another society within no time. So, the behavioral pattern, that even the thought processes are changing, which makes the differences narrowing down. With this, we complete the characteristic features of culture.